Welcome back into the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast, the last section with Mid-Major Matt, our closer for the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast. Mid-Major Matt, welcome in. How you feeling?
Doing well. Coming off a nice 5-3 week last week. A couple of frustrating losses to have to overcome, but some of the plays we gave out last week, the Georgia Southern first half came through. That was a very workmanlike Georgia Southern effort in that first half of their victory over UMass.
Mid-Major Matt, we're doing section 3 here. It's rotation number 367, 368, Texas State, BYU, all the way to the end of the card here. Plus, we got the VIP section at the end of the FCS matchup. So pretty much any American football game that you want to bet, we are breaking it down on Wednesdays on the WagerTalk YouTube channel. Also, wherever you're downloading your podcast at the Sports Memo podcast. And starting off here, section 3, Mid-Major Matt, and you got all 3 degenerate specials here, meaning they're all starting after the 10 p.m. Eastern kick. So people always interested a little bit on this, the get back, the degenerate, whatever you want to call it. This one is the degenerate of all degenerates, though, just because it is Texas State versus BYU, mainly because of the point spread involved. Minus 28.5. That's BYU laying in Provo, 60.5 being the total. And of course, Mid-Major Matt, we tell everybody, don't bet anything you can't afford to lose. Don't chase. Don't bet too much just because it's the last game on the card. Having said all of that, if you had to make a bet, side or total, what would it be? And what are you thinking here, Texas State versus BYU, man?
Well, so there's several things to consider here. First off, BYU is actually going to have fans, 6,000 fans in the stands, which I think 6,000 is about, you'd have to look at the stadium and see the acoustics and everything here. But, you're going to have 6,000 fans here for BYU. And look, BYU essentially, before they added Boise State to the schedule, last week was their Super Bowl, going across here. They beat Houston 43-26. It was a very impressive game. It was a slow start, and then they took over and they ran away with the game. And so they basically are playing now for style points. They really just, if they want to get a playoff spot, which is now a long shot considering the Big Ten and the other conferences are coming back, BYU's got to keep putting up big stats and big numbers, and that they're going to do that here. A couple of things to consider on the BYU side. Gunnar Romney, their number 1 wide receiver, tweaked his hamstring. Didn't play in a lot of the second half. Of course, they didn't necessarily need him. Dax Milne took over. But it'll be interesting to see what Gunnar Romney's status is, and it'll be interesting to see if he does play. They may hold him out for something like this. And then also, Kalani Sitake in the depth chart, and I've talked about this in the past, the depth charts are nice, but they don't tell us everything. They're just kind of for the median, for the game notes and things like that. But they put basically or for every offensive line position. He was not happy with some of the offensive linemen and how they played against Houston. So we kind of think that there's going to be some guys up front who are the stationary starters who are going to play, but it'll be interesting to see how much of a rotation he has on the offensive line. On the Texas State side, they lost at South Alabama 30-20. We talked about this last time. I kind of leaned to Texas State. I was glad I didn't actually go the window with it. This is their 5th straight road game with a week off in there. So they had a week off, but they've played in 5 straight road games. So that's got to be a little bit of a wearying thing for them. They've allowed the most tackles for loss in college football. Basically, what I'm looking at here, and you have to kind of look at your sports book, I'm looking at the team total over for BYU. As I said, I think that they have to get style points. They have to put up 60. They have to basically, especially since they're going to have the eyes of the nation on them, or at least the nation that's awake that late, they're going to have to put some style points up. I think BYU does that. You could potentially look at the first half team total over and the game over here, but I think BYU's got to do all they can to continue to put themselves in the mindset of the voters, and so they'll continue to beat up on bad teams.
Yeah, this one being on ESPN and, the 10 o'clock hour, I'm with you. They're going to look to put style points on. My suggestion would be if you need to bet it, minus 28. It is mostly 28.5s out there now on the BYU side. Mid-Major Matt, we got Mountain West football kicking off on Fox Sports 1, Utah State and Boise State. We're seeing the Broncos minus 16.5, 53 the total in Albertson Stadium.
So people are going to get frustrated because I'm going to be a little wishy-washy here. But, of course, these are the first time we're going to see some of these teams. And, of course, it's the Mountain West. And, we had that other game that we should have had, which was the New Mexico-Colorado State game. And, of course, they canceled that. Remember, that's not even a postponement. That was a cancellation. They're not going to make that game up. So, with regards to this, just some things to look at. Utah State's going to start Utah transfer Jason Shelley under center. They've got 4 returning offensive linemen. So it's a good place to start. Whenever you look at the offenses, you want guys that are stable up front. But they return just 5 starters on their defense. You look at their depth chart, 8 of the 11 starters are seniors or grad students, so that's going to help. They do not have their All-American kicker, though, for the first time since 2014. So if this was a close game, which it probably won't be, Utah State can't rely on Dominic Eberle, who's their All-American kicker. And then on the Boise State side, I mean, you look, Hank Backmeyer, whether you like him or not, I mean, he's a decent quarterback, but he's stability for a program like this. Chase Cord also back as a backup. They've got their top 3 running backs, their top 3 wide receivers, but only 1 offensive lineman return. So that's a concern, at least early on. Their defense is going to be strong. Their strongest group is the linebackers. They add NC State transfer Brock Miller here. I think the common thread for a lot of these Mountain West games is if you get the chance to watch them live and get a feel. I think that for some of these teams, go back to week 1 when we did these shows, there are a lot of question marks, and some of these teams had more practice time. Some of them did not have practice time. So to me, if you want to play this game, I think you should watch the first couple drives, see what happens. Maybe Boise State comes out and they score the first drive or 2. You kick yourself. You didn't take them for the game, but maybe they start slow. Maybe you see some things. Maybe they miss an early field goal. Maybe they punt a couple times, just miss on a couple things. I think for a lot of these Mountain West games that we talk about, live betting is probably the best situation. Boise State's the best team in this conference. If you noticed, Drew, and I don't know if you saw, I think it was in the Westgate, they're minus money to win the Mountain West. The next biggest team is at like plus 300. They're overwhelming favorites here. They should win. But also, by the way, Boise State, not the best team covering at home. They're against the spread numbers at home aren't the best. So to me, this is a wait and see situation. If you can watch this game, get a feel for how they both look. I think Boise State wins this game, but the number's kind of big here. I'd like to see what I get from Utah State early on.
Yeah, we got Johnny Outlaw joining us. Brandon in Seattle, welcome in. Ryan S. as well. Johnny saying the blue Smurf turf hurts his eyes, and it will be on that blue Smurf turf. You brought up the New Mexico game, mid-major, Matt, and that one was canceled, but it wasn't because of COVID on the teams, right? It was because of some local ordinance.
Yeah, they probably should have never started their season. New Mexico basically has the same thing with regards to travel. Like once you leave, then you have to quarantine or whatever. So basically they should have never probably played their season, or they probably should have gotten out of New Mexico and practiced someplace else like San Jose State did.
Interesting. Okay. Well, we got next up FAU at Marshall. Thundering Herd minus 17 now at home. 51 the total. I like the Thundering Herd even with this number, mid-major Matt. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think this number is probably not even big enough. I lean to Marshall, too. I mean, Marshall last week was very impressive in their win at Louisiana Tech, 35-17. They've beaten up on everybody. They beat Eastern Kentucky 59-0. They beat App State 17-7, and they beat Western Kentucky 38-14. 12 sacks so far this season, and they're killing clock here. 34 minutes of time of possession. Brandon Knox has done such a good job at running back, and that takes the pressure off Grant Wells. They're actually holding the ball 8 minutes longer than their opponents. On the other side, Florida Atlantic, they've only got 1 game so far. The game was postponed last week. They beat Charlotte 21-17, but here's the problem. 38 players were out due to positive tests or contact tracing. Coach Taggart said 2 more since then. He said, quote, I expect a lot of guys to be back and ready to go. I think it's a game time decision. It could be good today and tomorrow could be totally different. They are expecting James Charles, the running back, to play. BJ Emmons is dealing with an ankle injury, but then again, we don't know. So to me, I'm going to go with the known quantity here of Marshall. And I think that Marshall, you could even look at a team total under here for Florida Atlantic. I don't know how they score because even if these guys come back, Drew, what's their fitness like? You know, when you get COVID, they want you to basically not do anything for, a week and a half, 2 weeks. So then you come back to practice. Are you going to be ready to go at 100% right away? So to me, Marshall's worth a look here. And especially, look, if there's a slow start here, hammer Marshall live, because as this game goes along, Florida Atlantic's not going to have the endurance in the third and fourth quarter.
Yeah, and this is a game, mid-major, Matt, that it opened, 13.5 at Circa, maybe even less than that. And now it's all the way up to 17. We've seen the market kind of see a lot of FAU in terms of they lost Lane Kiffin, and maybe even more importantly, they lost Chris Robinson, the quarterback from last year. He was really good. I think it's a big drop-off to Nick Tronti, their backup last year. So a couple reasons there why I'm liking the Thundering Herd. Now we got a little bit of Mountain West all coming in a row. And I'll tell you, mid-major Matt, looking at these teams, looking at these matchups, I forgot how much I really like this conference. We got Hawaii at Fresno State up first here. Fresno State -4, 67 the total.
Hawaii's offense is going to be really good again this year. Siobhan Cordero, I'm hoping I say that right. He's got his 2 good wide receivers, Jared Smart and the North Texas transfer, Rico Bussey Jr., who I really liked when he was with the Mean Green. They've got a really good stable of running backs, although I think it's funny. Their backup running back is Calvin Turner. He was the starting quarterback at Jacksonville in the FCS level. Jacksonville got rid of football. And then he transfers to Hawaii. They do return only 7 of their top 14 tacklers. They allowed over 200 yards on the ground last year. They only had 17 sacks total last year. So Hawaii's defense was pretty bad. On the Fresno side, 5 new defensive starters. Washington transfer Jake Haener is going to be their starting quarterback. It's his first career college start. So there's a lot of question marks on the Fresno side. I lean to Hawaii. Not going to get to the window there. The total's pretty high, and I think it is for good reason. The question is, do you want to wait and maybe get that slow first quarter out of the way, live bet the over, and hope both of these teams get into a rhythm here? I'm very leery on first games here, especially for Hawaii on the road. They've got the better offense, but their defense is just horrendous. So I lean to the over here, but I might also watch the game, live bet the over after a slow start. Maybe both teams go out 3 and out early, and we get a better number on that total.
All right, second of 4 straight Mountain West games here, 377, 378. UNLV at San Diego State. We're seeing the Aztecs minus 14 in the hook at home, 49 the total.
Well, obviously, I'll be interested in your take on UNLV as well, being that you are there. Their new coach, they've got a new coaching staff. Marcus Arroyo, the offensive coordinator from Oregon. He's going to run a pistol offense. Offensive coordinator is Peter Hansen. He's coming over from Stanford. So automatically now they're behind the 8 ball because they've got a new coaching staff that they're trying to learn. They do have Charles Williams back, the running back. He was the Mountain West leader at running back. But we don't know who's starting at quarterback. It could be Kenyon Oblad, could be Max Gillum, could be the TCU transfer, Justin Rogers. Coach Arroyo basically said, I don't know, and I'm not going to tell you. And then there was the dreaded COVID word that they talked about. There's multiple COVID tests and multiple potential COVID issues on campus, which we won't know until game day, which makes me want to wait at least till Saturday to play something here. On the San Diego State side, Carson Baker was named the starting quarterback. He beat out Georgia Tech transfer Lucas Johnson. But Baker talked about how during the offseason, he had to do a lot of his learning of the offense over Zoom meetings. I mean, that's not the way you want to go coming into this thing. The wide receiving core is going to be really good. This team's not going to be as much run as they were in the past. The other question mark here is their starting center. We don't know if he's going to be available. He is a bit banged up. And week 1, you need your starting center for an offense like this with a new quarterback and everything. So there's a lot of question marks in this one. I'll probably wait till Saturday. But Drew, what's your thoughts on UNLV?
Wait and see because of that COVID issue you talked about. I mean, I think it's very difficult to be betting in 2020 when you hear COVID and what players are affected by it. I don't ever blame the head coaches for college football for not naming the quarterback just because it is a competitive advantage. That's another difficult thing. But I think that, all 3 quarterbacks, especially after the offseason, or at least the 2 returners, I would look for some improvement there. New coach as well. So I think it's a lot, in flux here with UNLV. It's not something that I've bet so far, but I mean, it is one of the degenerate special games, 10:30 Eastern kick here. So I might be involved a little bit before kickoff mid-major match just to have a little action. We also got it going simultaneously here with Air Force at San Jose State. This one on Fox Sports 1, 10:30 Eastern kick with Air Force laying 7 on the highway, 62 the total here.
You rarely see totals this high when you have a service academy team, but I think that it could be here for good reason. Air Force actually has a game under their belt. They beat Navy 41-7. Air Force was basically going to play only 2 or 3 games. They were going to play Navy. They were going to play Army. That was going to be their season before the Mountain West decided to come back. So they've been practicing. They've been ramping up, but San Jose State now has some video. Air Force went 2 of 9 on 3rd down against Navy. Their quarterback, not as good of a thrower as they've had in the past. So that's something to watch if they do have some 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s. But they were humming. I mean, they basically went up and down the field at times on Navy. Now, a lot of times they had to kick field goals, but Air Force has the game under their belt, and that's another reason why they're favoring this one. We talked about San Jose State briefly. They practice 300 miles from campus. So on the one hand, that's an inconvenience, but on the other hand, it's like a sleepaway camp. Basically, these guys bonded over, in Humboldt State University, so that's going to help build team chemistry. You also have to like that they've got Nick Starkel, the Arkansas transfer. How funny is it that San Jose State beats Arkansas last year, and now the quarterback is in San Jose State, right? San Jose State was the one that beat Arkansas, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So Nick Starkel's now in San Jose State. They're going to mix him in with Nick Nash, who's more of the running quarterback. This wide receiving core, Trey Walker, Bailey Gaither, and Isaiah Hamilton, 174 catches, 2,691 yards, and 12 touchdowns through the air last year. Pass-heavy team here. They attempted the 2nd most passes per game and had the fewest rushing attempts per game, so they know what they're built on. Nick Starkel threw the ball a lot in Arkansas here, so I kind of like San Jose State. I know that Air Force played a game, and it might not be good early, but San Jose State's got a really solid offense. Their defense has got some looks now probably at Air Force. So I kind of lean San Jose State here. It's not a huge play. It's, of course, if you want to play something and feel like you need something for that late game, I actually kind of like San Jose State plus the points here.
All right. I'm kind of with you on that one. We got Wyoming at Nevada up next. We're seeing the Cowboys laying 4 in the hook, 51 the total in Reno.
I really liked Nevada before the season, and I was disappointed when they didn't get to play because if you look at their offense, a lot of their good players are back. Carson Strong at quarterback, Toa Tawa at running back, their wide receivers, Cook, Stovall, and Dubes. It's an offense that should be able to put up some points. The question is, they're going up against a Wyoming team that's going to run it, and they want to run it. And guess what? Nevada's nose tackle is a walk-on. Their nose tackle that they were originally supposed to have got in trouble, so he's not going to play, and now it's a walk-on. Well, against Wyoming, that's not going to help. On the Wyoming side, their most experienced defensive lineman's not going to play. Garrett Krall will not make the trip to Reno. He's working his way back from a foot injury. They've got stability at quarterback, whether it's Sean Chambers or Levi Williams, who was a bit of a revelation last year. I leaned to Nevada here, but I also wonder why Wyoming's such a big favorite. They were really solid last year. I probably will sit this game out, lean to Nevada, though.
Yeah, Nevada had some off-the-field issues there with some sort of sting they had going on there with some of the football players. It was kind of a weird situation. So watch out for that. And of course, we have seen Wyoming take a little bit of money, open 3 up to the Cowboys as high as -5.5 at some shops. We got Southern Miss at Liberty up next, 63 the total. Liberty, the Flames here, mid-major, Matt, -11. They've been a great bet.
Yeah. You know why? Because last week they went to my alma mater and ran up and down the field on them. They went to Syracuse. They won 38-21. My question here is focus. And I have to wonder, look, Liberty's playing really well. They're ranked in the top 25, I think, or they're just on the outside. They're playing really well. Malik Willis has been a very good quarterback for them. They're also going up against Hugh Freeze's alma mater. But this is a team that after the game Saturday took pictures on the field at Syracuse because they beat their first Power 5 program. Like, what is their focus level for a Southern Miss team coming in? That has their own issues, which we'll get to in a second, but Liberty's a big favorite. So I wonder if we don't get the best focused effort here. The other thing is they do have a bye next week, but then they're traveling to Virginia Tech in 2 weeks. Now, I wish the Virginia Tech game was next week because then we could play the old sandwich situation. But I wonder about focus for Liberty. The problem with Southern Miss is their head coach has COVID, and we don't know if he's going. We also don't know. They were the team that got the UTEP game postponed last week because they had 20-plus players that were out due to positive cases and contact tracing. They would have had 44 to 45 scholarship players last week if they would have played that game. So to me, I've got a potentially unfocused Liberty team against a Southern Miss team that we don't even know who's going to be out there. So I can't make a play in this game. If we get a better sense closer who's going to play, I need Jack Abraham out there, obviously. If the coach is available, I would love to play Southern Miss here, but I just can't when there's potentially 20-plus players who are missing. The head coach could be missing. So we'll keep an eye on this as we get closer to kickoff here. I lean the Southern Miss, but I can't play anything until we get a better sense as A, this game even plays, and B, who's available.
Heading to the Big Ten here for a top 21 matchup. We got Michigan at Minnesota. We're seeing the Wolverines -3, 54.5 being the total here, Matt.
By the way, Corey in the chat, I can't decide on the over or the under until we know who's playing because, I need to know. Southern Miss could have nobody playing, and then they don't score points, and then you're depending upon Liberty. So wait until we get closer, and thank you, Johnny. They were pretty close. They were pretty close. I don't know if they were like 26 or 27, but they're getting more votes every week. This game's interesting, Drew. I was surprised when this line came out because Michigan is a young team. They've got the youngest offensive line in the Harbaugh era with 4 new starters, just 17 total starts on the offensive line. So that's a concern. Nico Collins, their best wide receiver, not with the program. Of their 6 scholarship wide receivers, 3 are sophomores, 2 are freshmen, and junior Ronnie Bell. You've got Joe Milton, a quarterback who probably wasn't going to be the quarterback. Dylan McCaffrey decided that he's not going to come back. So there's a lot of question marks on a Michigan offense that hasn't performed the past couple of years. So and then you look at Minnesota. Minnesota loses their offensive coordinator, which is always a big loss. Tanner Morgan is back at quarterback. He's got Rashad Bateman and nearly all of their offensive line, and their secondary is pretty good. And they do lose Antoine Winfield Jr., so there's a lot of guys on both sides that aren't going to be here. And then PJ Fleck hinted that there's going to be players missing due to COVID once again. And look, I understand the coach is playing coy here, but it doesn't help us handicappers. I lean to Minnesota here. There's so many questions, and I actually kind of lean to the under. I don't know how Michigan's going to score here with all the problems they have, with how young they are. Maybe you look at a first half under and see Michigan struggle early on. But Drew, and I don't know if you have thoughts on this game, but there's just so many question marks on that Michigan offense that I can't believe they're favored in this one.
I kind of like row the boat here. I like the home dog, Minnesota. I mean, 11-win season last year. I thought that they were an underrated team, looked great in the bowl game. Now, Michigan, I think there's question marks as well. A young team, like you said, a lot of unproven guys having to go on the road against a good Minnesota team. I really don't want to lay points, so kind of going against some of the chat box here, but I like the Gophers catching 3 at home. We got Georgia State at Troy up next here, mid-major, Matt. This is one I actually really like. I like the Georgia State Panthers here, plus the 2.5, but I really do think the wrong team's favored, so I like them money line as well, mid-major, Matt. What are you thinking?
Well, I think that I see where you're coming from, because everybody's going to see what was that? It was Wednesday or Thursday last week, whatever it was. They lost that game, but they went back and forth. Everybody scored, and it was, the team that had the ball last basically won the game. But then you look, Georgia State lost by 3 to Lafayette, and they beat ECU. And I'm not a huge fan of ECU, but if you notice the common thread here, everybody's scoring. 49-29, 34-31, 59-52 were the 3 scores here. I don't know how much of last week Troy just didn't take Eastern Kentucky seriously. Ironically, I actually was watching the first half of this game, and Troy had some opportunities to add more points. I think they had a drop touchdown. They had some penalties. I don't think they took Eastern Kentucky very seriously. If you look at Troy's season, they beat Middle Tennessee 47-14. They beat Texas State 37-17. They lost 48-7 predictably at BYU. I think the better play might be the over here, because I actually think Troy's the better team here, and I think we're getting some value, but I don't know if I'm ready to commit to Troy. So instead, I think we're going to get plenty of offense here. I think the Troy offense is able to move the ball in Georgia State, and obviously Georgia State should be able to move the ball in Troy. I lean to the over here, Drew. I don't know necessarily if Georgia State should be favored on the road in this game. I think we just got an unfocused effort from Troy. So if you do like the home team in this one, I think there's some value, but I think the over is probably the better way to go in this one.
All right, we got Conference USA up next, mid-major, Matt. UTEP at Charlotte. We're seeing the 49ers. That's the Charlotte 49ers. Minus 14.5 at home, 49 the total.
UTEP's playing their 3rd consecutive road game. Of course, they did have their game postponed last week against Southern Miss. The last time before that, they lost at Louisiana Tech 21-17. You could argue that they were the better team in that one. There were some penalty issues, some turnovers that did them in. We've talked about it. The joke is UTEP, I think, is one of the few teams that actually huddles. They're one of the slower teams in the country when it comes to running their offense, only 18.4 points per game, but they're only allowing just over 22 points per game. So it's a defense that has gone up against some decent opponents and actually played some decent defense. They are 0-24-1 in the Eastern time zone. The only time they did not lose was a tie against West Virginia in 1949. So that's something to look forward there. Charlotte's had this crazy season so far. They win that game at North Texas 49-21, but they've had COVID issues. And then they've had, I think it's up to now 3 or 4 postponements. It's pretty crazy when you look at this Charlotte team. They're 2nd in the nation in time of possession. UTEP is 8th. I lean to the under here, and I actually do agree with Parlay King here. I think UTEP's worth a look here. I think they can drag Charlotte into a slower type game. I think when you're getting 2 touchdowns, and then the question is UTEP going to score here? And I don't know if they can. The thing is, when we think about this, so it's 49.5. The totals or the spread is around 14.5. So you're basically saying, and I'm trying to do the math on the fly here, it's like 20. I don't know what the math is. Never mind. I've never been very good at the math. But 30-16, 31-17 is what we're kind of thinking. So can UTEP get to that 17 number? I don't know. That's the big question. If you think they do, then take UTEP in the under. If you think they don't, then you probably lean Charlotte in this one.
Guys, check out Mid-Major Matt at sportsmemo.com. He's good in the NFL and college football. Actually, his last 44 college football plays hitting 59%. That's 26-18. He's also 13-8, 62% in his last 21 MLB props and NFL props. He's very good as well, 58% run. Check him out, sportsmemo.com. We got to kind of book it here, mid-major, Matt. 5 minutes left. MTSU at Rice. The Rice Owls minus 3.5 at home, 50.5 being the total.
First game for Rice, nearly their entire defense is back minus 2 players. Last year, they held North Texas to 14, Louisiana Tech to 17, Baylor to 21. They will start Baylor. TCU transfer Mike Collins at quarterback. Their leading wide receiver did opt out of the season, so it's going to be August Petre to third and Austin Trammell at wide receiver. MTSU has been a mess. They lose to North Texas 52-35. Their only win was by 3 at FIU, and they scored late to get that win. I like Rice in this one. I think they're the better team. I know they're playing their first game, but they've got plenty of tape to look at for Middle Tennessee, and Rice is not going to be a bad team this year.
I like Rice. Haven't heard that in many years, Mid-Major Matt. So, hey, might be worth a shot here against MTSU. We got Louisiana Tech at UTSA, 53 being the total, with the Bulldogs -2 on the highway.
UTSA just has no luck. They lose that game to Army, and they lose their best quarterback of the season, Lowell Narcisse. He was carted off, and so Frank Harris is back under center. They just can't get any continuity on offense, and that's my concern here with UTSA. But then again, you've got a Louisiana Tech team that scored just 52 points the last 3 weeks. Their offensive line is allowing a ton of sacks still, even with some of their guys back. Opponents have picked up more than half of their third down opportunities, 51% of the time. So to me, neither of these teams are worth betting right now. I know that's not the answer people want to see, but I think Louisiana Tech's better, but they're on the road and they're not scoring points right now. UTSA has continuity issues at quarterback, so this is an easy no play for me.
Mid-Major Matt, do you have anything on Kentucky, Missouri? I see it's kind of relocated here on the odds map, -5, 46.5 being the total.
Of course I do, Drew. That's on my list here. So Kentucky gets that win last week, 34-7 at Tennessee. They've won 2 in a row now, but they've got the dreaded look ahead potentially. A home game against Georgia next week. Kentucky's averaging only 142.5 yards per game through the air, so they don't throw the ball, which means Missouri, who's had the week off because they got the COVID postponement last week against Vanderbilt, now they're just going to stack the box. Kentucky's got the best red zone defense. Missouri's one of the better teams when it comes to red zone offense, so that's where the key is going to be. Missouri has had COVID issues, but their coach came out and basically said currently no one has it, but we're still waiting on a few tests. I lean to Missouri here, Drew. I think that you've got the dreaded look ahead for Kentucky as they host Georgia next week. Plus, it's not exactly like this offense is doing very much lately. I think Missouri's worth a look at home in this one.
Ooh, all right. Mid-Major Matt finishing it off there for FBS versus FBS. Now it's time for the VIP section. FCS only. Have at it, Mid-Major Matt.
So I'll only do the 2 games. I'm not doing the third FCS game. Mercer is at Army. Army about a 30-point favorite. Mercer is only playing 3 games this year. This is game 2 of 3 for them. They lost at Jacksonville State 34-28 2 weeks ago. You've got an Army team that won the game with their third-string quarterback last time out. They beat UTSA 28-16. They've already played 2 FCS games. They beat Abilene Christian 55-23, and they beat the Citadel 14-9. It's a big question as to which Army team we get. I lean to Mercer here. 30 points is a lot. We don't know what the quarterback situation is for Army. I'd like to wait till closer, when we get to closer, and see if Jamel Jones or Christian Anderson are playing in this game. They have a bye week, and then they play Air Force, so you know they want to be healthy for that game against Air Force. If we get a better sense as to who is under center, I think I might lean to Mercer here. 4 touchdowns in a Service Academy game is a whole lot of points. Last game of the season, or at least last game of this thing, Chattanooga at Western Kentucky. Drew, this is Chattanooga's only game of the year. They're not playing any other. I mean, they're playing in the spring, but this is their only game of the year. 9 offensive starters back, except their quarterback. They do have to replace Nick Tiano, who is really good. Drayton Arnold will be the quarterback. They've got 8 defensive starters back, their long snapper and their kicker. They played 1 FBS game last year, lost 45-0 at Tennessee. Western Kentucky is a joke. They've been abysmal all year. They lost 37-14 at UAB last time. Their offense has scored 21 points or less in 4 of their last 5 games. And this team can't take FCS teams seriously, it seems like. Last year, they lost to Central Arkansas 35-28. 2 years ago, they lost to Maine 31-28. Their coach had a quote that said, basically, for us this week, it's all about us. It's not about the opponent. We're not going to take this game lightly. We can't afford to. I think guys just are anxious to get out there and get a win. I think I lean Chattanooga here. Only game of the season. They get a FBS opponent. Western Kentucky is just trying to fix themselves here. I think Chattanooga can get some stuff done. Small lean here to Chattanooga. We'll see what the number is closer to kickoff on Saturday.
Oh, good stuff, as always, from Mid-Major Matt. He's killing it. College football and NFL. Check him out, sportsmemo.com, and on Twitter at Mid-Major Matt. You can also shoot at me on Twitter at Drew Martin Betts. Any questions you want answered on the pod? Mid-Major Matt, anything else you want to throw out there before we shut this down?
No, a good slate of games, and just caution and patience with the Mountain West games in their first game. Just if you're going to live bet it, I think live betting might be a better way to do it because you get a feel for some of these teams in their first game of the year.
All right, mid-major Matt, I'd like that as well, especially with all the COVID issues, seeing these guys play, and then going from there. So good stuff as always from mid-major Matt. Guys, we'll be right back with Minty Bets in the second half of the NFL Every Game on the Board podcast. Thanks for joining us, guys. Best of luck until then.